Calus obviously making his grand debut. Cool to finally see him in his all gold shiny arm. I mean, technically we had never even seen him up until that Vidoc, had we? We'd seen obviously lookalikes of him, but we didn't know if that was what he actually looked like. Then we saw him in the what would have been the reveal, I guess. You see him all wrinkled in the bath, and then he comes out all looking like some pharaoh emperor. I love Calus. Calus is probably one of my favorite characters. He's just and his whole story arc of being this weird like Roman emperor space turtle dude that you don't know where you stand, and then we were kind of his errand boys, just helping him out, helping him clear the Leviathan, and then he seemed to be on our side, and then obviously because he was opposed to Gaul, and then somehow it kind of slowly flipped. We see Keitel, then she becomes our ally, and then Calus goes off to the darkness and he becomes the enemy, and now I would imagine we're going to see Keitel versus Calus, the big father-daughter showdown.
Oh yeah, no question about that. I think the word that ultimately epitomizes Calus, regardless of which point in the storyline you're referring to, is greed. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you have raid mechanics that literally cite it, but even down to the story that is told in the back lore from his very early days, even up to the little extra tidbits we learn about Keitel, you know, it's not always greed in a monetary sense. Like, yeah, absolutely, he totally was someone who believed in hedonism and opulence literally being all about being as flash as you freaking can be. But it's, you know, it's also about the idea that he is entitled to everything, you know. This is the guy who, and this is there's a little bit of a distressing lore for some, so if you don't like bad things happening to animals, just a little warning. This is the guy who killed his daughter's dog because she loved her dog more than him and paid more attention to the dog than to him. You know, this is a pretty screwed up guy.
It's a functional family.
Yeah, and it ultimately does reach that end state where he sits there and comes to this conclusion of, okay, the universe is ending. I will be the last person to witness all of eternity blink out of existence. I will sit there and I will chronicle it at the end. I am entitled to that.
Yeah.
You know, and that's ridiculous when you sit there and look at it, but that's totally what Calus believes.
Yeah, he's been saying that for a while. Since way back, he's been saying, you know, he wants a front row seat of the end, and he wants to be there. And do you think he'll be a raid boss? How do you think he'll meet his end? Because I'd imagine, you know, like I can't really see any other way that would beat him. But we've already had the Leviathan raid with him as a boss. But do you reckon he's worthy of being a raid boss?
I think he'll be a campaign story boss. The raid is, I mean, there's speculation abound on the raid, but I feel like Bungie is making it fairly clear that the raid is something other. You know, something that is within the bounds and expectations of the story, but is definitely not Calus. It's something else that is probably going to be revealed in parallel to the story. And not to speculate too much on it, but I think we can look at Witch Queen for a kind of cue as to how they're doing these things now. And I think that's important because Bungie has proven that they can make a good one-shot raid boss, if you get what I mean. You know, it used to be back in the days that, and I've said this a bunch before, Taken King worked because it was a 3-act structure around a single character that needed all of those 3 acts in order for them to be good. Savathûn is not Oryx. Savathûn worked as a campaign boss alone, and with some dialogue and some big impact on the story after her death. Rulk works as a raid boss, not only because he's fantastic as a raid boss, but also because there are subtle little hints to his presence throughout Savathûn's throne world. You can always see the pyramid in the background. You know the Scorn are there, and that Savathûn is fighting a turf war with them. You know that they're being sent and directed by someone, and you're just not sure who it is. And that becomes the big mystery that unravels in the raid. And when Rulk does finally sit there and say, "Welcome, children of light," suddenly all the questions start to get answered, and new ones appear. You know, it's the reason why Vow, as far as the deep lore it's got is concerned, is some of the best raid lore that I think we've ever gotten.
Yeah, one of the best looking raids. Rulk is one of the best looking bosses. I haven't played it enough, but I really do love that raid. It's such a clean, and the fact that it's so, you know, you couldn't predict it and just have a final pyramid raid and all the architecture. It's and I just love how Bungie doesn't miss with raids. Their track record with raids is so solid. You know, there are other areas of the game that people could argue that they're not so great at, but raids, the raid team, they do not miss. And it's just nice to see that no matter what happens, they always deliver a solid raid. Even up until the most recent raid, they still aren't like letting it slip. And they always have that as a high priority of this needs to be unique. This needs to be a proper, solid experience. And it always is.
Oh, yeah. I feel like Val really changed the game for that too. Like, it upped the ante. You know, this is the first time we've had people sit there in the Destiny community and be like, damn, this really is a Dark Souls boss, which is saying something about the encounter design for Rulk. It really is. Because it doesn't just mean like, oh, this is a hard encounter where the boss isn't just sitting there and static. This is not a traditional Destiny boss. It's also sitting there and saying, this boss has character. You know, when Rulk moves around the arena, when you're just prior to the DPS phase, he struts. He doesn't, you know, I'll bleep myself here, but he doesn't give a shit. You know, he really doesn't care. Like, Guardians are sitting there and they're doing all this frantic stuff, running around trying to put the right symbols in the right things, and he's kind of just walking
hands
around
behind
the place.
His back.
Zero weapons out except for the occasional charge of the glaive. His main attack is to kick you.
Yeah.
I mean, that says it all. And it's not just some... Yeah, it's not some desperate, like, combat move. He is literally donkey punching you. Yeah, exactly.
It's just like, get out of my way. You're annoying. Until he does get annoyed. And then when he gets annoyed and the spikes come out, then he's angry now. But he's a very chilled raid boss.